So this is my disclaimer. This presentation is not legal advice. If you have specific legal questions, you should contact an attorney. There is an attorney, his name is Brian Steinbach, who is available for consultation as an attorney. But the purpose of this presentation is informational. Now, my question has always been, do mandates increase vaccine confidence or increase vaccine uptake? Mandates actually do have some effect, a positive effect, but it's, as we spent the last 2 hours discussing, you need a mix of different approaches to be able to have a large effect on people's uptake of vaccines. Mandating vaccines is part of that mix, especially for healthcare workers. There's a lot of stuff here from the CDC, but let's talk about Brian himself. I had the best time talking to Brian yesterday. He's a brilliant labor and employment lawyer with Epstein, Becker, and Green. And he has worked on everything. He's worked on union avoidance strategies. He's worked on quite a range of issues for healthcare related entities. He has litigated on labor, disabilities, non-competes, confidentiality, benefits, wage and hour, general litigation, like all kinds of things, like so many things. He's an expert. He's been doing this for many, many years. He has experience in the courts, his experience as an advisor. And he went to law school, University of Virginia, sits in the National Labor Relations Board in Washington, D.C. And most importantly for us, he is the board counsel to the Maryland National Capital Home Care Association. So Brian is, if you want to reach Brian, you can reach him at bsteinbeck@ebglaw.com or at 202-861-1870. So his information will be available among the resources that we circulate after this session. And in the chat, we have included a link to some information from the EEOC that Brian provided, as well as a handout produced by his law firm. So with that, I am going to stop sharing, hand the floor over to Brian to talk to us about mandatory vaccination and other legal issues of import for home care agencies and other senior care providers who are trying to engage their staff around getting vaccinated. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Charlene, and thank you, Dawn, for once again roping me in on something fun to do. Well, I'm going to just talk very briefly, and then I think Charlene's going to ask me some of the key questions, and then we'll open the floor to the other questions that people may have. Let's start from the top. You have the right to require vaccination. The EEOC has recently confirmed that employers have that right. There's no law that says you can't do it. Obviously, in the healthcare field, there has been mandatory vaccinations for things like the flu for some time, not without controversy. And the overriding thing to remember on that is if you're doing it, you're still going to have to consider making reasonable accommodations to anybody who has some sort of disability reason, medical reason why they can't take the vaccination, or potentially a religious objection. So it's not a cure-all. But having said that, I would say it's probably not the best approach, at least initially. There are a lot of pitfalls in what you might be doing, and there is some possibility of lawsuits on this. Most recently, there have been some lawsuits filed under the theory that, the rather strange theory that somehow, because this is still technically experimental vaccines, that it's a denial of their rights to require them to essentially be human guinea pigs. Notwithstanding that, you know, some 150 million people have already taken the vaccine in the United States without any significant number of serious problems. That's the argument being thrown out. There's a big article, Newsweek had it yesterday, about Houston Medical, where they are requiring everybody to get vaccinated, and a small group of employees have objected and are suing. Yeah, in fact, even at least one person who got the vaccination is suing over the fact that it's required. Remains to be seen how far those will get. A lot of pundits seem to think they won't get too far, but still have a cost of dealing with it. And at the same time, I think fairly soon we probably will get at least the Pfizer and maybe the other vaccines have a final use authorization, given all the data that they have to now support after really a year of people taking the vaccine because of all the trials, that it's safe and effective. So, the recommendation I would generally make is not to do it mandatorily unless there's absolutely no other choice. There's also, of course, this sort of employee morale issue involved in doing that. Now, having said that, aside from the things that you've been discussing in the morning, there are things you can do. You can ask if someone's been vaccinated. It's not a protected class under the law. So you can ask, make the inquiry, but any documentation or other form of certainly written confirmation is medical information that's considered PMI. So asking it's okay. It's not a disability related inquiry because vaccination status is not a disability, but it is PMI. As I mentioned, you will have accommodation obligations. And as I think was already discussed, you can do a lot of things in terms of rewards and incentives to get people to take the vaccine. There is some difference between what you can safely do if you are sponsoring the vaccination yourself versus sending them somewhere else to get it done. Because in the former case, it's like an ADA potential thing, and there's limited amounts of incentives that the EOC says you can do. But apparently, if you say, if you go out to one of the centers that are giving immunizations, we'll give you, $10,000. That's legal. Not that you would do that. One form of incentive, I don't know if it was mentioned earlier today, but just in case it wasn't, and it's the easiest one to make, and probably makes a lot of sense given your workforces, is to provide paid time off to go get the vaccine. Particularly since people often work double jobs and don't have a lot of spare time. Giving them a couple hours at the beginning of what would ordinarily be the beginning of a shift or the end of a shift might be a sufficient incentive. I guess that's all I have for openers. Charlene, if you want to go ahead and hit me with the questions.
Thank you, Brian. That was a great overview. And I know we already had questions popping up in the audience before you joined. I'll ask one or two questions, and then we're going to open the floor to anyone to go ahead and ask you questions. So when I've talked to other groups about this vaccine champion model, where a company identifies certain staff members to serve as advocates to their peers or to other colleagues about the vaccine, questions have come up about whether or not those advocates can be can know the vaccination status of their colleagues, because it is protected information. Like it's the difference between knowing the vaccination status versus documenting the vaccination status. Like, can you have one caregiver become a vaccine champion and know things about the other caregivers, who's been vaccinated and who hasn't? That'd be one question. The second has more to do with whether or not the champions can be, like you mentioned, incentivized. Like, if you actually have an explicit program where you ask someone to serve as a champion, to what degree can you incentivize that? I assume that there are different rules around how you can compensate that, because that's actually work, as opposed to what you were describing before in terms of offering too much that might be perceived as coercive. So those are the two questions.
Yeah, let me touch on some initial thoughts on the latter one first. I mean, they're not being rewarded for taking the vaccine, they're being rewarded for getting other people to take the vaccine. That said, it sounds a little bit like bounty hunting. If you get too far ahead of what they do. So I like better the ideas of, group celebrations when you meet targets. Overall, some, sure, a small gift card, for being willing to do the work, because you really don't necessarily want that person reporting back, well, this person that wasn't vaccinated, I asked, and isn't vaccinated. Well, that you don't want that information. The individual can certainly ask. I mean, employees can ask each other. Certainly something they could do. And you go down. Maybe you don't know who's vaccinated, but you ask them if they are, and if they're not, then they're going to try to persuade them that they should. And it's a voluntary thing by the other employee whether or not to say they are or they aren't. It's not, you're not requiring them to reveal the information. It's very tricky because it's the borderline. As I said, it's not protected status. You can discriminate based on the status. But on the other hand, the information is protected. So you have to be very careful about who asks and who knows. Even when you're requiring it of everybody to be vaccinated, or everybody that's in the field, everyone who's providing medical services. And the first question was. Talked too long, I forgot what it was.
It's okay. You kind of answered it. It's essentially can a vaccine champion ask another, like a peer or another colleague about their
okay, I think that's permissible. But it's what happens with the information that's acquired that is problematic. So that they shouldn't be reporting back to HR. Well, these people are, these people aren't. Now, something more generally, I talked to a bunch of people, and I think there's, a half dozen that have now agreed to go get it. That's not personally identifiable.
Right.
So it's not PMI. So
right.
Once you aggregate it, it's different, as you know.
That's really helpful. So is Tiffany still around? Tiffany's first question was on mandatory vaccination. So Tiffany, you get the first question.
Yes, to unmute.
Here. Tiffany might not be at her computer.
I see her name, but she's muted.
Tiffany. That's okay. Let's see if anyone else has questions while we're waiting for Tiffany to return. And the floor is open to ask Brian anything you'd like around the legal questions you might be grappling with, particularly as it relates to mandating vaccination. And that includes you, Dawn, if you've been hearing from members of any concerns about or questions about mandatory vaccination.
Hi, I'm sorry, I was muted. Hi, Brian.
That's hard to do, Dawn.
Yeah, I know, right? With me, it is. We had a private duty member meeting yesterday, and this was a big topic. Was, there's a lot of the agencies are trying to incentivize their employees by giving them gift cards and meeting one-on-one and doing a lot of the things that Charlene talked and Carmel talked about doing to try to get people to agree to take the vaccine. But the question was, do they go as far as mandating whether or not they should take a vaccine? The private pay people felt as if the situation would sort of resolve itself in that if a client refused to have an unvaccinated employee, that it was going to reduce their ability to get work, because it's really the client who's driving, who goes into their home to a certain extent. However, there are, there's also other agencies that are not requiring it. So, that it is a big concern, a big question. Can they mandate it? Should they mandate it? Because we have some agencies that are sitting around, still around 20% vaccinated, and others that are as much as 85% vaccinated. The 85% vaccinated are the ones that are applying all these tactics, good tactics, to get people to get to that point. But, they're asking, for guidance of, what they should do. And of course, we don't have that. And some of them were questioning whether or not you could mandate it based on the fact, Brian, as you said, that it is not yet, a finalized vaccine, that it is still, under emergency use, because that came up yesterday as well. So
it's in the press, so people see it.
Right. So I think, and I think, well, and our government affairs people that are on these calls are all over that too. So, so I think everybody's sort of in the same boat right now, as far as whether or not they should get to the point where they mandate.
You raised a very interesting question about the clients. You can't reveal to your clients vaccination status because it's PMI. And now the client can ask the person if they are vaccinated because they're not the employer. And, so that leads to sort of an odd situation where you send the person out and they get rejected. And you have to pick the next person in line.
Right.
That person. And I hadn't really thought about this. I just read something that somebody else wrote yesterday about this particular issue, and there's not really a great solution for it. There are, potentially, you can, like I said, let the client ask, but there's not much other way that you can communicate the person's status, even if you know it. Because you have asked that you found out who is vaccinated. And I suppose you could quietly only send people that you happen to know are vaccinated if that's a special request. But without, because you already know that from having asked generally. But it's tricky. One can only hope that the state will require vaccination for healthcare providers. At least people who are going into other people's homes and where they have no choice of who it is.
Right, and these are the most vulnerable of the population. So,
right. Yes, your government affairs people should lobby for a requirement, at least for the patient care people. But then it's a lot easier to enforce. It's a legal requirement of the job, for you to be vaccinated. So you have to have it.
I have another question, Brian. Now,
Sure.
If they did mandate it, could a state mandate it, or would that have to be a federal mandate?
Oh, a state could mandate it. Yeah. I mean, don't they mandate the flu shot?
They do.
Do they?
They do. I looked it up. They mandate for healthcare workers. They mandate the offer and the reporting, documenting the status for the flu vaccine and also for MMR.
So they don't
they're including home care, but it definitely for healthcare
So
workers.
they don't mandate that they get it. They just mandate knowing the status. Is that right?
They mandate that the employer offer it.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Oh, a little different. A little different than it being required.
Yeah, you can offer it and you have to report like what happened, but you can't force someone to get vaccinated.
Well, you can't. I think you can, but that's not a state requirement.
Exactly.
Okay, so home care agency, we're located in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. We have about 500 caregivers, and they work between private homes and facilities, independent living and assisted living. the ones in the facilities are already vaccinated because that was mandated by the facility management as of April 1. We're starting to see now that a lot of our private clients are saying, are your caregivers vaccinated? And if they're not, they're like, I don't want them. I don't want them in the house. I only want someone who is vaccinated. So we're on a major push to try to get most of our caregivers vaccinated, because right now we're at only probably about 30%. So my question was, I'm ready to send out a letter stating July 31st or August 1, you have to be vaccinated. If not, we understand, but do know that your weekly hours may decrease because of the demand from our clients. And is that okay to do? Is that okay to do? And is it legal?
Yeah, I think it's legal, and I think it's okay to do. I think what you're trying to say is that you'll tell them that if they need a accommodation for medical or religious reasons, they should talk to you.
Correct.
And you can do the same interactive thing you would do with any other kind of disability situation.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's places you can still send them, you'll send them there. There are not many other alternatives. I mean, maybe some people will accept the person if they always continue to wear the mask,
Correct.
while they're doing care. And that's certainly a reasonable accommodation for someone who can't, for medical reasons, have it. Now, not every customer is going to accept that, I guess, but we can hope.
Right. And my next question was, I just heard you say that.
And I would add to that, you're giving them notice by July 1st, and if there's any general problem just in getting it done, they should talk to you.
Right, right. That's what we are
Provide
now.
them with some paid time off if they need to get it.
We're doing all that. We're giving Uber
All that good
lifts,
stuff. Yeah, right.
all that good stuff. We're like, please go. We're doing
Bubblegum
$25
cards,
for each
whatever.
dosage. Yeah, believe me, we're on it. So I heard you say that alerting a client of the COVID status is against or is a violation. So if I can't tell the client, hey, this person is vaccinated.
What you can tell the client is that we're requiring all of our people to be vaccinated unless there's a medical or religious problem and an objection, in which case we require them to wear masks. That's not telling them about any individual. You're telling them. I think that's the only way I know to get around it.
Oh, okay. Because we've had them ask individually, like, okay, we're going to send caregiver such and such. Is she vaccinated? Yes. Okay. Is she vaccinated? No. Then I don't want her. So
Yeah.
my staff is saying yes and no.
That's potentially a problem.
Okay.
As I said, you'd think you would be able to do that because you know it, but you can tell the person, if it gets down to that specific, you say, because it's protected medical information, I can't reveal that, but you're free to ask the person.
Okay, because some of them do want interviews with the
I would think particularly in private duty, they probably they want to meet the person, and they come in for a couple of days and see if they like them.
Yeah, we're starting to do that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, could I ask the caregiver, hey, do you give me permission? They're asking, and I need to ask you, are you okay with me providing that, and maybe get that in writing or in a text?
Yeah, I think that would work.
Okay.
Yeah. Because just like you might ask them for some other medical situation.
Right.
Can I reveal that to this person?
Okay, perfect.
Is there any chance that might be perceived as coercive, like where your employer, where you feel like you don't have the opportunity to say no because your employer is doing it?
Good question.
Good question. And then it might be, I mean, you can't, maybe there's a way to do that in a more general way, when it's not hanging on a particular job.
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe we can start now of, hey, because we have them sign a photo release when they start, saying, hey, you might be including some of our, pictures on our website. And maybe now we need to start doing something for COVID and telling them in advance, and then giving them the opportunity to to say yes or no without the threat of, hey, if you don't, then you might not get this shift.
Right. And that's worth trying.
Okay.
Yeah, there's always a risk. That's all I can say. But
Okay. Okay.
Thank
Good
you.
information.
Thank you, Tiffany.
Thank you. All right, I'm going back on mute.
okay, Cheryl.
Cheryl.
Hello, Brian. I have sort of a two-part question for you, but I want to let you know a little bit about me. The organization I represent is the employer of record for collective bargaining purposes for a home care workforce in Oregon. And so I work very closely with the union. And so one of my questions is kind of the flip of the question that Tiffany just asked. What if the worker wants to know if the consumer, and we refer to the client as the consumer in Oregon, the consumer employer has had the vaccine or has some other medical condition that they want to know about? Is that protected? Could we, as the employer, say to the worker, well, yes, this consumer has these conditions, or yes, they're vaccinated?
Off the top of my head, I would say I would think you should be able to do that because you're not that person's employer. You know, you're asking them, your obligation to the PMI is with regard to what you have and your employees. I would think you could ask them, but frankly, I've never seen anything one way or the other on it. So,
Yeah, because with the Department of Labor, we're a third-party employer. So
yeah.
that's what makes it complex. The consumer is employer. We're the employer record for collective bargaining purposes. Right. And then the Oregon Department of Human Services pays the worker on behalf of the consumer.
Right.
So it's a little more complex.
The employer of the employee, and you're the employer.
Yes. Yeah, they have the right to hire, fire. They have all the employer rights.
Joint employers, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, as I said, I think so. But I've not seen anything from the the EOC one way or the other on that particular topic.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering about that.
Might be a good question to submit to them.
Yeah.
They do update the Q&As somewhat regularly, and they just did this big update, and then of course the CDC changed its guidance like a few days later, messed everybody up. But
yeah, I have looked at those, and so I was just curious. My other is regarding incentives. So I'm working with the union to develop incentives for workers who have not yet taken the vaccine. They don't have the first or second dose yet. And right now we have about 52% of a 40,000 member workforce that has received a vaccine. And so we're having discussions about what that looks like. Should we do monetary gift cards, that kind of thing? And do you see that being a problem? Anybody can take advantage of it. It's, nobody's going to know who has a vaccine or who doesn't have a vaccine. It's just going to be put out there. If you've received the vaccine, you can get this, put your name in for this raffle, or get a gift card to this place, or tickets to the sporting events, or something like that.
Sure. The EOC has put its imprimatur, so that's okay to have those kinds of incentives, which are relatively, small amounts. But you're not administering the vaccine. You're telling them to go get it wherever Department of Health.
They'll get the vaccine at a local clinic in their community.
Go to your local drugstore or whatever. I think you can require them to give you some kind of evidence that they actually got the vaccine.
We were talking about that. What should we do? Do an attestation form and just that they just say, yes, I got it?
I mean, that probably works, but or just give us a copy of your card. I mean, they can be forged, of course, but
Mhm.
you know, but that's a matter of negotiation between you and the union. What kind of proof is
Yeah,
required?
we were leaning towards attestation. We've done that in other things. We did the CARES PTO form, and we had them do the attestation form saying,
Yeah,
I mean, it gets a little kind of messy. We don't want, I can see data, but we don't want too many people involved with data. You
right.
know, I do the data reports for who's
Well,
received
it's
it,
PMI
but
one that they had it once they
yeah,
give you.
yeah.
So
So I don't, you know, I don't want to get into like looking and verifying all these folks. You know,
yeah, well, I mean, I would think that some of that is bargainable, and some of it maybe just more discussion with the union. But and I don't know what the
it's going to be
uh,
discussion because they have a trust. And so the trust would be responsible for
good.
the
Yeah,
benefit.
right. All right.
Mhm.
But you know, how you do it. I mean, in collective bargaining, sometimes it's not how you do it. It's where you get it's what you end up with. It's other times it's how you get there. So
Yeah, yeah,
and then you're doing public bargaining, which is a whole different kettle of fish that I
yeah,
not
yeah.
particularly experienced with and try to stay away from. But um,
Well, that's good to know that it's not like prohibited. We were
no,
just
it's certainly not
wondering.
prohibited to have a
Mhm.
program like that. If it, you know, EEOC envisions that people will have programs like that, and you know, encourage them to do it. And part of that is you got to know if they did it. You know?
Right, right. And yeah, and I'll bring that up that, you know, maybe they should show the card. The other thing is
$1 million
what
lottery here too, you
yeah,
know.
that's what I was gonna say. Well, in Oregon, we do have that.
We have it in Maryland too.
And we've talked about $100 incentives as well.
And time
So
off.
if you yeah, well, they do have a pay time off benefit already. So for this workforce, if they work 80 hours or more in certain months, they're eligible for paid time off benefit. So they do have that.
I think Ryan might be talking about special paid time off in order
Yeah.
to get vaccinated that doesn't require them to use their existing body of paid time off.
Yeah, that could
Yeah,
be an, you know, you get 2 hours of additional paid leave to go get your vaccine.
yeah, we've done things where allowing them to go with the consumer employer to get a vaccine so that we have like both of them going together. And that
That's
has worked in some cases. So we've brought them together. We've done special clinics where they can come together. And so the workers pay for that time to be there with the consumer employer.
oh, that's great. Good idea. Two birds with one stone.
Yeah, do it on work time and get and pay them is what we've
Right.
been doing, and paying mileage to the worker if they decide to drive the consumer employer to the vaccine site.
Mhm.
Okay,
That's good.
that sounds great. Thank you, Cheryl.
You're welcome.
Does anyone else have any other questions for Brian? We got Laura, we have Lorelei, Judith, Renara, Veronica. Anybody? We've got two Veronicas actually. Two versions of Veronica.
Looks like Veronica's there twice, actually.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And somebody has a very vocal cat.
That's me. She's deaf, so she's very loud.
Oh, that's hysterical.
And she's 21 years old, if you can believe that. And this is the time of day where she usually decides that she wants some food. So.
Okay, well, it sounds like there aren't any more questions and
Well,
your cat is hungry. So I think this is a good time to transition away from the mandatory vaccines. But thank you so much, Brian, for taking your time to come and share.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Brian.
Let's do
Thank
the
you.
same thing. Let's give him our emoji of choice.
There we go.
Good to see you, Brian.
Well, I didn't get to see you, Dawn. You're hiding.
here.
But...
Here I am.
Ah, there you are. Good to see you.
You too.
How's your husband doing?
He's much better, thank you.
Oh,
Yeah,
great.
he's doing great, thanks.
Super.
Thank goodness. Thank you for asking.
All right.
All right, thank you, Brian. I'll be in touch.
All right. Thanks.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.